Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of the USL show. Before we get too far into this, we all want to send a lot of love to our friends out in Louisville. Um, I'm sure a lot of you, a few seconds in, are like, this is already one of those kind of podcasts, huh? We're not going to spend the whole time talking about this. We may not talk about it past this intro. But, we only have a voice in so many ways. There's only so many tweets that our fingers can type, and we want our voice to be out there as much as possible. And to all the people that will inevitably DM us about quote unquote keeping politics out of soccer, shove it and block us. I say that politely. It needs to change. Crap needs to change. There's no point in people dying over fits of anger and unhelped mental illness if it can. So send lots of love to our people out in Louisville City. You are in our hearts. And if there's anything we can do to help, please let us know. Moving on from that, is that a Ipswich shirt, Ryan?
Yes, it's from the Away Day City, their mystery shirt collection. I haven't gotten a mystery shirt in a while, but this was one of the ones that they had sent to me, which I thought was pretty neat.
Nice. John, how are you, man?
Yeah, doing well. Not to linger on the point that you were making, but let's get some gun control in here. What happened in Louisville is tragic. It's the continuation of endless tragedies in this country. So we'll end the politics now, but it's an important message to be out there.
Absolutely. Look, there was a lot of soccer played over this last week between the US Open Cup, between some matchups between some of the best teams in their respective leagues, some really fun stuff that happened. There's a lot to break down. So as we've been trying these new formats, if we don't talk about your team during the recap because you said, well, that match was more fun to recap than the one you'll preview, it's kind of a half preview, half recap whenever we do our previews. So stick with us. I want to go ahead and start off with our USL Tactics show this week. If you haven't been following us or John on Twitter and you missed it, do that. But hey, you come to a good place to hear it now. A Tampa Bay team that I've been very critical of. Maybe they figured it out.
Hello and welcome into the USL Tactics Show, where today I want to talk about how the Tampa Bay Rowdies moved from a 4-4-2 shape that ultimately had been leaving too much space in between the lines into a more successful 3-4-3. As you can see diagrammed here, the 4-4-2, especially in the high press, can really get spread out and leave room between the vertical areas of the pitch. What Tampa Bay did by changing up their shape is compress the forward line to deny that first pocket and instruct their center backs to get really aggressive in back to defend behind their central midfielders. And you're going to see that latter point shown again and again here. That's Freddie Kleeman stepping up to apply pressure in the first clip. Across the board, you saw Aaron Guillen come narrow often, Jordan Doherty doing the same thing from the right side towards the center of the pitch. And the cumulative effect was that Miami simply could not find space between the lines in that really dangerous, quote unquote, zone 14 area right in front of the box where you optimally want to be finding your touches. You're seeing it there with Guillen cutting in, forcing Miami to move out of the most dangerous areas and just never find that penetration. In the early weeks of the season, Tampa Bay had struggled to defend in these scenarios with Lewis Hilton's injuries, with some of the issues that the team had been having. They simply were giving up too much space right down the middle of the pitch. That changed against Miami, and Miami only got 3 shots on target in this game, none of which came inside of the box. The Rowdies really put in a classic performance from a team that you would suspect to be one of the elite defensive sides in the USL time and time again. You'll cap it off with one more example here with Forrest Lasso, who came off as a sub, but it really put a nice icing on the cake for what was a shutdown performance as envisioned in the heat map, where Miami did very little in the dangerous areas of the pitch. This is what you want to see if you're a Tampa Bay fan expecting a return to form.
Every time I watch that, the cricket noises gets me every single time. We will talk a lot about Tampa Bay in their match tomorrow and what they did well, the changes that were made, some possible, communication going on in the back that maybe, could have fixed things for Tampa Bay and how it will go with Charleston. But let's go with the USL Championship match of the week, or at least the one everybody thought would be the match of the week. And I am talking about San Antonio versus Sacramento, right? And as we always see in these big time matchups, I mean, how many times have we watched the Premier League and it's like, oh man, Man City and Liverpool or whomever. Granted, this last time it's not a great example, but it's like they're going to play each other. It's going to be awesome. Match of the week, match of the day, match of the season. It's going to be incredible. No draw, because both teams are both equally trying to win it and also equally trying not to lose it. And it just ends up being exciting, but nothing. Maybe I'm a little bit wrong here. But as someone who's not a San Antonio or Sacramento fan, maybe the most exciting thing was probably the most dangerous, and that's a fan coming onto the field to give a ref a yellow card.
I mean, you're not wrong about that aspect of it. A crazy lapse of security, by the way, but I'm not going to go too much into that. This game was kind of marred by the fact that both teams were missing a handful of key players. Like for San Antonio, not having Mitchell Tainer is a huge deal. And Connor Maloney, because of who he is as a human, was able to comfortably slide into the center back position and look utterly perfect there.
Biceps.
Yeah, right. I think San Antonio probably had the better of the chances. That's not to say that Sacramento was bad here. Missing Sebastian Herrera as the real number 9 in the team was a bigger deal than I probably anticipated. He's sort of that hold-up striker who is just going to take up space, draw players in, and make the room that has made Russell Cicerone so dangerous this year, for instance. And changing into a 2-forward shape made them a little bit less effective against the back 3 for San Antonio. So you had a little bit of give and take going each way. I'm interested to see where these teams are next time they play in Sacramento, but they safely feel like the top 2. I mean, you can throw in San Diego maybe for a top 3 right now in that conference, no matter what.
As some things change.
Yeah, and I would have those teams are my clear top 2 teams, and the ELO ratings that I run in San Diego is pretty close by, just across the entire league right now. But like if you looked at these 2 teams when they played last season in the regular season, those were both 1-0 games, each team winning their 1-0 results at their respective home, and this was their first, or at least San Antonio's first 0-0 result in the regular season in quite some time. That it went all throughout last season without one. So, yeah, I think a kind of low-scoring affair is kind of in tune with what we've seen from this sort of matchup. And we have to wait until June 24th for when they meet again in Sacramento, where these 2 teams will probably kind of have a better understanding of where they are and hopefully have a few more players back.
Yeah, my thing with this match, right, and I saw a little bit of the conversation, and I try not to get too far into this rabbit hole, because in the end, XG only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, right? It really doesn't matter, but it's one of those things that you can kind of tell a general trend throughout the season. And I saw a little bit just on the San Antonio space whenever, who is it that always comes out with the XG graphic at every single...
It's by way of American Soccer Analysis. I can't remember the name of the account. Yeah.
I saw a lot of fans just being like, hey, now San Antonio, super unlucky. Look at how much XG they have. They had over double, 3 times the XG as Sacramento.
Yeah, this was 1.2 to 0.6 at the end of the day in favor of San Antonio.
But if you watch the match, it's all fluffed XG, because they only had 1 shot on target in the box. The 1 shot outside the box that was on target was it didn't really test the keeper that much, right? Everything else, they had a couple of point blank shots. I think 7th minute, who was it? Was it Bautista? I think that had like a point blank shot at the in like the 7th minute. But you know what? It was defended beautifully by Sacramento, where it was pushed wide off target. Maybe it took a deflection. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm sure with that, being where it was going off the foot, that the XG stats just bumped way up. But it does not take into effect that Sacramento played it perfectly. And you say, well, Sacramento didn't create a lot, but no one creates a lot against San Antonio. It felt like a defensive masterclass either way, which in the end leads to pretty boring matches for the neutral.
Yeah, I mean, agreed on all counts. I think neither team was going to sell out to go for 3 points here when it's so early in the season. Both have dealt with a little bit of ups and downs in terms of the roster. It's not worth it at this point.
For sure.
Especially with a lot of the season left, and you're looking at a San Antonio team who is going to be playing their pretty much USL Championship rematch in Louisville this week, and just kind of more looking at it kind of in a larger picture sort of deal.
Absolutely. But when we want to look on, we'll talk about matchups of the week. Even though it ended in a draw, I don't know if there were many more matches that were more exciting than this North Carolina versus Charleston, Chattanooga Independence match, right? I mean, it gave you, yes, it was game flow. Thank you. Ryan even put it in our private chat. That's the one. This was a match that it was hairy for a little bit. Eventual red card, a couple attempted massacres. There was a definite shout for a penalty at the very end of the match for Jaden Cervania, who appeared to be dragged down and no call was called. It was one heck of a match in Cary where I think a lot of Charlotte fans feel a little hard done to not come away with, all 3 points when you look at just kind of the chances they were given. But if you're North Carolina, you're looking at a match where you didn't play amazing and you have a legitimate penalty shout at the very end of the match. You're looking at that and saying, well, we were a little hard done by here. And all it's doing is setting up a fantastic, second edition of the Dogwood Derby.
No, I mean, this was a really exciting game. Both teams probably amongst the more offensively minded in League One. Certainly, I liked a lot of what I saw from Charlotte. That Dane Kelly goal was as classic as you can get, with him like getting the subtlest little touch to kind of deflect a ball into the net. I probably think that North Carolina was the better team here. I think they were a little bit more fluid, did a better job of getting in between the lines at that 4-4-2 for the Independents. I'm kind of curious about the fact that Garrett McLaughlin is being almost eased back into the team. And that's something that it's a luxury you can afford when you're as deep as North Carolina is in attack, but he is such a good forward. And I think he had a real impact when he came in later in the match. So just a couple stray thoughts there.
Yeah, he also almost had the game winner at the very end that Pack made a wonderful save on.
Yeah, and it's interesting looking at Charlotte having started the year unbeaten, as they have a little time off towards their next game. They don't play again until Wednesday the 19th against Omaha, and then they have Fuego coming into town. That this has been a kind of, I think through the preseason, they may have flown a little bit under the radar because North Carolina really got the preseason hype this year as everyone's focused, but Charlotte has really put together an impressive kind of start to the year, or as everyone else in the league has either just not played enough games yet or just has a more slower start to the season.
And with that first goal that North Carolina had, I think they were a little fortunate here because I think it's Joel Johnson. He is tracking back, and this ball, and Anderson, who eventually gets the goal, he has so much space on the left side that it's painful. There was so much space on that side, and maybe he thinks that he's going to be offside, but I don't think he is. They hold it up, they go out right, and then I think it's Jaden Cervania takes a shot and takes just a unfortunate deflection and good finish. But again, one of those things that a little fortunate with the goal, because I think the goal would have been a lot easier if they just played that the first time, which has kind of plagued North Carolina this year, where they have this super attacking system and they're just not as free flowing as like Charlotte is, right? And it helps that a lot of the Charlotte team has played together, whether it was last year or, 3 years ago and all coming back for their homecoming. This team has played a lot together, and you can tell where that continuity comes even under a different system. I think that once North Carolina finally gets that, really gets that chemistry underneath themselves and start playing together well, they're going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, and NCFC, I mean, they're second in USO 1 in shots right now on 39, with Charlotte ahead of them on 58. So they're creating enough shots that eventually they're going to make things work. But like you had mentioned, Kaylor, it's just really just going to take time.
Moving on to our next match, if I can find it. And it is another League One matchup of Red Wolves versus One Knox, where I have broken my own rule. I said I was never going to lock a League One team because it doesn't make sense. It never makes sense. And what did I do? I locked a League One team. Chattanooga admin and I talked before the Legion Red Wolves Open Cup match, and he commented on the fact that I locked One Knox to win the match. I like to think that he printed this on the board and was like, hey, this idiot thinks you're going to lose. And for a while, I thought I was going to be right. And finally, Chattanooga started playing kind of how we thought they would. There was the shouts for Ziggy to be out were getting loud. And it's early in the season. But one thing that's so frustrating with this team is that they get the possession, they want the possession, they do the whole thing, and they have talented players, and they get up to the top of the box, and it becomes just this swing across, swing across, swing across. They don't drive into the box. They are looking for channels to shoot on side the box, but never taking that chance of stepping into the box and shooting. They would rather look for the window, take the step then and go. And I think that's where a lot of issues came with the fans, where it just felt like they were holding on to possession because they're a possession-based team and it was pointless possession, or I usually just call it lateral possession. You're not going forward, you're not going backward, you're doing nothing. And in this match at the very end, after going down 1-0, Chattanooga started just going forward. And it was really nice to see that they just decide just to say, you know what? We don't have to stay outside the box anymore. We don't need to do that. 3 of their shots happening inside the goal or inside the box. And, the one goal that eventually goes in that ends up being the game winner is outside the box, obviously. But still, you finally saw the progression come in for this team.
No, I mean, it's what you mentioned stylistically, where that goal from Varela was about as route one as you can possibly imagine, where they just decided, listen, we need the goal. We don't care about the style that it's going to take to get there. I do want to throw in a good word for the performance that One Knox put in. I thought, especially second half, they brought in Andreasen. I'm mispronouncing the last name because I'm baffled by Scandinavia, but he's like 6'5", but really nimble, really good moving with his feet. I thought he was a big deal coming on, making a real difference for them. I thought that they got some good contributions from the wingback spots. Chrysler was good in the back line as well. This is a team that feels like they're going to be in the mix. That said, it's a pretty tough result for them to drop this one. But hey, I mean, Red Wolves, credit to them, made the changes they needed to do to really get the 3 points here.
Yeah, if you're One Knox, you had 1.48 in XG from the last game, most of that coming from Ilya Ilik's penalty, of course, but it's still at least an encouraging offensive display, even though that Chattanooga came back and picked up the 2 goals to go ahead and take all 3 points in this one. And I think it's just going to be one for One Knox, and especially for Lexington, that just being a new expansion team in League One, there's still going to be some growing pains, especially going up against these teams that, as we had mentioned, have played together and kind of has that cohesion. And I think just more so that they just a further commitment to what they're still doing, that like we had mentioned, One Knox will be in the mix here. It's just a matter of just kind of figuring things out.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just a team that it's a team that really, with Red Wolves, they were poached with their talent. And what they really impressed me with is the fact that out of whenever a team makes a mistake, I'm about to say the stupidest thing I think I might have ever said on the show. And I'm just going to say this, and it's going to be so basic, it hurts. Red Wolves can't beat you if you don't make a mistake. And that's like, duh, don't make mistakes, you win. But the thing is, it's like one small touch that's a little too heavy. They press you so hard and start the counterattack like that. If you keep to these short passes and keep it between yourself, Red Wolves don't have a lot to go because they don't force mistakes. They just capitalize upon them. So if you can minimize your unforced errors, they're not going to force you to make them. And I think going forward, Red Wolves are going to be a team that when they start facing teams like, well, I mean, Madison, your not Chattanooga, wow, your Greenvilles, so on and so forth, you're going to see them struggle a lot more. And, this very young, One Knox team that hasn't played together a lot, that's what you'll see.
I do think this result was important for Red Wolves just from a sake of confidence. I mean, this was their final home match of this 3-game opening stand. And having not gotten a win in their first two, they really needed to get a result here as they have to travel to North Carolina this week. And then you have Lexington, the rematch against Tormenta the week or the following week. And it's really challenging to kind of start the year without that win and to basically go into this next North Carolina game, which actually is the 21st next week, is just key.
Yeah. Well, moving on, let's go ahead and go back to the championship, but we're not going to be done with League One. We have stuff to predict later today, but I want to go to one of the better matches of the weekend, despite my beating heart. Phoenix go into the Magic City and ruin the unbeaten season for Legion. Phoenix, a team that came in, I think, still winless, but there is a massive asterisk there that they played San Diego twice and Charleston once, two of those away. Does that really count? Yes, and also no. And Phoenix came out and really took it to Legion at the very beginning. They were a little afraid of the press that happened to them, but once the legs got a little tired for the three Sparks, they were able to show what they were really good at, and that is, creating havoc in the midfield, bombing it up, and kind of saying, screw it, Trejo down there somewhere. And Harvey. Harvey was ridiculous in this match as well.
Harvey is an interesting one for me. I mean, I think coming into this year, everyone who even knew who he was associated him with being that guy who got a bunch of red cards for LA Galaxy 2. And he looked so good in this game. I mean, dropping between the center backs, getting up the pitch, pitching in defensively. He really did it all. You mentioned it with Trejo coming on in the second half. I think Phoenix kind of lacked for that creative presence in the final third, someone who could pick up possession and do something with it beyond Harvey. And just having someone like a Danny Trejo to get beyond the press, which I think Birmingham lightened up in as well as the game wore on. So there was this confluence of factors that gave Rising a little bit of an edge. But I really think that Phoenix has acquitted themselves well in what's been, as you've mentioned, a pretty brutal schedule to start the beginning of the season. So as they get into a little bit easier pickings, I think they're going to really start racking up some points.
Yeah, and like from the first half from this one, Phoenix really just had the 3 shots to start, and just when they got those 2 in the second half, even with Birmingham immediately answering after that first goal to kind of come back and get all 3 points from this one, it's just a really crucial result for Phoenix. And as John, as you had mentioned, it will slowly start to get easier. And I mean, they have Monterey Bay and San Antonio as their next 2 games, so. Oh, just to at least start getting some of these points on the board is just great for just the encouragement of the team.
Right now, Legion, and I can talk obviously about this all day long. So, whenever we need to move on, I'm going to try to keep it as short and simple as possible. But Legion have a real thing that they need to figure out. Do they want to score goals or do they want to have a balanced defense? Because Gabriel Alves is a wonderful scoring fullback at this point who is basically playing center mid half the time and occasionally likes to cameo as a fullback. But the thing is that Phoenix were attacking that defensive right side pretty heavily throughout the game. And while Alves was able to out athlete, whoever he was going against when it came to the aerial ball, whenever things were going wrong, typically you could look at that right side and say Alves was kind of the crux of that. But you also look at that and say, hey, dude scored twice now. Do you want to score goals or do you want to prevent them? And Legion have a really interesting issue where they have to make a choice. And for Birmingham fans, you're like, dang it, score goals. We've never done that before. But also, do you give up a little bit of what you're built off of, which is a stifling defense? It's an interesting thing going on down in Birmingham.
Yeah, and I mean, just to speak to what you were saying, there was that first half where it was Emil Cuello on the right side for Phoenix. He wasn't doing much. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it Cuello or Cuello?
I heard Cuello in the past, and then the announcing team was hard on the Cuello this time around.
Because if he's Argentinian, the double L is a sh, right? Okay.
If you say, yeah, you know better than I do. I'm just going off of guesses with all of these names.
Anyway, go ahead.
He's just, I mean, he was the guy on the right side for Phoenix going up against Alves. He's just not that dynamic in comparison to Danny Trejo, who comes on and changes the game by really changing the balance of power on that side. And it completely speaks to what you're talking about there.
Yeah. And even to compare it to last season, you talk about just kind of Legion and scoring goals, but they haven't gotten shut out in a match since the 20th game of last season when they played Tulsa. And through the first 5 games of that year, they had 1 win in those first 5. And now through these first 5, they have just 1 defeat. And if you look at their upcoming schedule of Loudoun, Orange County, Hartford, and the Miami, that's all 4 pretty favorable games for Birmingham to continue just after a little dent in their form to kind of get back to their former winning ways.
Do you think there's anybody, if Phoenix's admin is listening to this, because typically you actually do more than you don't, which is impressive. Thank you for tuning in. Was there any want to be like on Easter Sunday to be like, Phoenix is rising? They're rising indeed. Like, was there any want to do that? Because I need to know.
This is terrible.
I mean, Gabriel Jesus scored for Arsenal on that day, and I had to mention into a group chat. I was like, "We're all thinking it. No one say it."
Oh man! All right. Before we lose any more people listening, let's go ahead and move on to the most shocking result of the weekend. But also, if you've been following, not incredibly shocking, but also super shocking. Indy loses 3-0 to Oakland. And if you're sitting there and saying, but that Indy firepower, they score goals. Listen, John, you just released your, kind of updates, I guess, to some of the best keepers in the league. And I always screw his name up, but Blanchette, he's a stud. He is so good. And he is super under the radar because a guy named Jordan Farr exists. And people forget Um, he's ridiculously good. And while you could say he was probably one of the sole reasons of keeping a clean sheet, the 3 goals against Indy's defense, wow, was not expecting that.
It's been a really odd year for Indy where, I mean, they had only given up 1 goal coming into this game. Um, they've just struggled to create in a way that has been able to earn them points consistently. You say what you will. I think Sebastian Guenzati, and he showed it for a lot of last year, isn't the player that he once was. I think Solomon Asante is really miscast as the guy at the top of the diamond. He just doesn't have that ability to break teams down in settled possession that you need. For Oakland, you certainly mentioned it. Paul Blanchette is the most underrated goalkeeper that there is.
God.
Yeah. Together we can combine to pronounce every name correctly.
Yeah.
But what I mean, they really took advantage of everything Indy gave them. The first goal was a pretty ponderous long ball over the top that Yannick Odell, Indy's goalkeeper, horrendously misplayed. I mean, he was 10 yards out of his box trying to clear it. Indy kind of pushed from there. There was a sloppy back pass that led to the second goal. So it was a comedy of errors for the 11. But if they're not going to score goals, they have to play error-free soccer. And that's just not a possibility. Like, no team is going to be perfect 90 minutes every single week. I don't know what the solution is for the 11 right now, but something is going to have to give. And you can point to the names. I know that some people said, listen, these guys would have been great in 2018, but what are they in 2023? And I think that's maybe starting to bear fruit as much as I didn't think it would be the case in the preseason.
And just looking from a historical standpoint, this is Oakland, I think, their best ever result that they've ever had in club history at away from home, and Indy 11 since they've joined USL, their worst ever home defeat. And just like looking ahead, I mean, you have Indy 11 going to Orange County this week, and you have Monterey Bay and Pittsburgh coming to Indianapolis in the following 2 games. But it's really something that they have to kind of figure out, like you'd mentioned, John, because they still haven't scored a goal since they beat Detroit in March.
Yeah, the thing with Indy, and it's kind of going to the crux of what you're saying, John, is that they bring in this all-star cast, right? We bring in the Lowry hits, the best of Lowry, essentially. But the thing is that when players get older, when they mature, not even just get older and lose a step, when players mature just themselves, their IQ changes and the way they see the game changes. So maybe Asante, if you look at him several years ago and you look at what he did then, dude was so flexible and just more athletic than every other human that he could have fit in that spot because he was just that guy. And I fear that Lowry looked at what he had and became nostalgic of what he had and not really looking at what he currently has. And this is early in the season. It is what it is. But this idea of going back to the greatest hits, it's not working right now.
I think the funny thing with the roster decisions they made was focusing on an Asante who, when he was at his best in Phoenix, was this right winger who would cheat out in transition, use his pace in the maximum amount of space to create trouble. When they brought in Douglas Martinez, I think after 1 week of this season, yeah, he's a striker ostensibly, but he showed in Sacramento last year that he really likes to be drifting out to the wing, doing that sort of thing, not being the guy in the box. Lowry isn't recruiting and prioritizing the pieces that actually fit his system, but he's still so doctrinaire about running that same system without the proper players in place. I think that's what's so confusing with the 11, because arguably the midfield and defense are completely fine. They've been fine-tuned and looking good. But when you don't have that linking player and you don't have the forwards, it's really going to cripple what he's trying to do, just given how possessive this team is and how much time they spend in the opposing half without the people to break a team down.
And I guess the concern that you would have for Indy 11 moving forward is that you don't let kind of a 2-game blip like this kind of snowball, because they had an instance last season where they went 5 consecutive games without scoring a goal, and to really just not let the form kind of trail off here, because they, as it stands, I know that it's still very early in the season. They are 6th in the Eastern Conference right now. You have 3 teams right now below them who don't currently have a win, and if it just needs to be 8th place to get into the playoffs, I mean, the bar is not as high as it's been in years past to just play that additional game for postseason football.
I'm going to go to a question that's in chat, and it says, "What player is going to step up and adjust?" And I'm going to throw it back at, this is not being like, "You're stupid." It was a question I was going to ask anyway, right? At what point is Lowry going to adjust? He has this system. He has his system. At this point, the diamond system that he's run is patented. He can take it to court if anybody else tries to use it, right? What he does is what he does. But we're also kind of seeing him be a slave to it. And there were a few times last year where they got away from it just a little bit, but then immediately went back to it. And that wasn't really to get back on track. It was just because it was just a team they were going against. They changed it just a little bit. At what point do you become a slave to your system? Because if we want to go to Premier League, because most people who watch this also watch Premier League, right? You have the team that everybody was like, "Oh, they're so bad. They're so bad." They really weren't that bad. Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, right? He stuck with his high pressing system. He stuck with having Trent Alexander-Arnold, suffering and being a liability at fullback this entire time, never changed anything, right? And eventually they seem to have kind of gotten out of it, and they're back to doing their thing. Maybe not the level they want, but they're back to doing their thing. On the flip side, you have a Graham Potter who goes to Chelsea, right? Who has a system from Brighton, wants to bring it over from Brighton, and suddenly it's not working, and he gets away from it too fast, and now they have no system, and now he's without a job. Right. At what point do you decide it's been long enough, this is not working? And when do you say we need to stick with this because eventually it will work?
And just to, pivot to the question, Indy has number 10s on the roster right now. Like, they brought in Harrison Robledo on loan from MLS. He started basically every game in the preseason, and he's played 40 minutes so far in league play. Jonas Fjellberg had 8 goals for Rio Grande Valley. So he started last season in Indy. Lowry decided he didn't want to play him. He loaned him out to RGV, where he tore it up. And then Fjellberg comes back. Fjellberg has played 1 game so far this year. I don't know what he did wrong other than just be awesome in Texas, but there are players who can fill the positions of need right now, and the refusal to lean into those guys is kind of baffling to me.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really confusing, because if you've made your name as something, you want to stick to what you made your name with. But at some point, I'm begging Lowry to change. Just show me you can do something else. Bring in a different player that can play your role. Do you know who would really like Fjellberg right now? RGV. They would love him right now.
Well, wait a minute. Will McBura is way too busy playing his son at striker.
Hey. I respect it. Listen, a little bit of nepotism has never hurt anybody, right?
Never. Not once.
That's the motto of F1. To be fair, RGV is one of 5 teams that are unbeaten right now. Although those are 3 draws they have.
We don't want to talk about that.
And a nice Open Cup loss to go along.
I put this out on Twitter. At what point do you say Omaha and Tormenta beating a team in the Open Cup, it's no longer a cup set? You could tell me that both those teams will go on to win the USL finals, or the US Open Cup finals, and I'm not incredibly shocked, because they just seem to do it. it's not even a whole pro rel should happen because they could beat anybody. They're just built for the cup, and I don't know why.
Watch out, St. Louis City.
Yeah. Soccer capital.
TM.
Which one?
we
Portland,
can't.
Kansas City,
Hey,
St. Louis.
I don't want to. Please just don't get us sued. I don't want to be sued. We can't mention that term on here. Thanks. Moving on to our predictions. I want to go ahead and start off with where our tactics show started us. And it is Tampa Bay versus Charleston. A rematch already. The USL loves early season rematches for some ungodly reason. And for some reason, almost all these rematches are matches that you want to see later on the season. I don't know what's up with that. But Tampa Bay seems to find their footing defensively and put on a real show against the Miami. Granted, we'll talk about Miami in a little bit. But Charleston has done nothing but score. And with one of probably the most exciting match of the weekend was this Hartford versus Charleston match. And all they do is score goals. So can this revamped defense for Tampa Bay hold Charleston at bay? Or I didn't mean to do that. I wish I was that clever. Or is it still going to be Charleston taking another result back to Patriots Point? I'm going to start with you, Ryan.
Yeah, interestingly, from last season, Charleston was unbeaten against the Rowdies. They had a 1-1 draw down in Tampa Bay and then got a 2-1 win at Patriots Point very late in the season. Early to start with the Battery being unbeaten to begin the year, I've actually picked Charleston to get a win down in Tampa Bay this year, but it's one of those that I'm really just kind of taking a more bet on that Tampa Bay's win last week is still going to go through some growing pains, but I just think Charleston has things a little bit more figured out right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I went with a draw here, but like every bone in my body is kind of yelling that the Battery are going to win this. I just have a belief that the Rowdies at Al Lang recognize that this is a pretty big game. I think I talked about it in the tactics show, obviously, but they've really seemed to have figured out the problem that they had of allowing so much space between their lines.
Communication, right?
Yeah, getting Connor Sparrow back in goal is obviously the biggest thing that's really helped take this team to the next level. With Sparrow in net, I think they're probably the favorite to go on and win it all, basically. But I will stop being a little bit sarcastic here and just note that the Battery are so good about pinching their wingers in, taking advantage and forcing you to turn the ball over. I think they're probably going to get a goal out of that, but I trust Tampa Bay to respond. So, draw.
Tampa's move to the 4-4-2 makes me want to shove my head through my table. It drives me insane because it doesn't work and they just kept doing it. And I'm really afraid that after getting a result, they're going to go back to it. But even so, this Charleston team is so good. They're just so good. I also lean draw, but again, I refuse to actually pick draws in the predictions. I'm leaning Charleston. Usually I want to go with the home team, but Charleston just kind of seems to have the magic right now. It's almost like the team where I don't even know if we talk about them, should have, paid the man, but they did not. And now he is down at Patriots Point, and they're about to be a force to be reckoned with. It's ridiculous how good they are.
Like Texas, the Battery are back.
Okay, you know what? We're not going to talk about their match, but I just want to get this off my brain because I feel like I'm going to lose it. If I don't, I thought I'd put their matches on the predictions. Maybe Hartford walks out with the result if Richard Sanchez isn't in net.
Just to validate, when I was going through that leaders of goals saved above average in the USL, I bet you could guess who's dead last in the league.
I feel like this is their version of nepotism. I know it's not their kid, but he treats them like one. Is he adopted? Like, why do they keep playing him? There's no world where Joe Rice is worse. It's so that match, they could have at least walked out with a draw. You can't say that Joe Rice saves every single one of those and they walk out with a clean sheet. Obviously not. Those were some well taken goals. But I mean, come on. They could have walked out at least with a point, which would have been huge for Hartford. But their reliance and just saying, we're going to start Sanchez is going to ruin their season. I'm going to go that far and say it's going to ruin their season. If they do not get him out of net now, they will be missing the playoffs.
That last second goal he gave up to Arturo Rodriguez on the free kick was tough.
It's not a good look for him.
And it's one of the concerns you have with Hartford looking at their next 2 games is against Oakland and Birmingham away, and that risk just being 2 games they don't get a point out of. At least one match you should have at least circled on the calendar is May 6th, Hartford versus Memphis, which could be interesting just for all the wrong reasons.
We'll certainly circle it. Moving on, because I just had to get that one off my chest. Let's go back down south. We're going to go to the other Magic City and talk about the Miami FC as they are taking on Detroit City, a Detroit City team who held out firmly against Louisville City, who simultaneously were trying really hard and didn't look like they cared at the same time. And Detroit City, who held on firmly, but you can't hold on forever. Do Miami break their home curse of refusing to win at home, or does Trevor James's boys go down there and get 3 points that they really desperately need?
I mean, if you're looking back at just all the previous results from Miami, the last game that they won where they scored multiple goals in was a 7-1 victory over a team that's now exited the league in New York Red Bulls 2. It's like we've said this like every preseason and every match that on paper, this Miami team should be better than what we're seeing. And they still have yet to have a game this year with multiple goals scored. I look at this match very much how Detroit played against El Paso, that I think they're going to go into a road match this year and pick up a result and get a win.
I lean Miami just because I have absolutely no trust in what Detroit is doing in their attack. I mean, that said, I think basically the same thing about Miami. I just think that they're a little bit more talented. I think they're going to come out realizing that they need to stake their claim pretty early on in the season in terms of the playoff race, just given how things are shaking out. And what better way to do it than taking advantage of a Detroit team that seems like they're down bad a little bit. I do think O'Neal Fisher, one of the recent additions for Detroit, could be a big deal. They've been slowly integrating him at wing back. He might be one of the solutions that finally gets them some offense, but I don't think it'll be enough on the day.
In kind of going for the match, Detroit moved away from their 3-back system and went with this like 4-4-2 and into this like 4-5-1. And it made little sense. And I know, hey, trust second half Trevor James, but also the second half, that was a horrible decision. It looked like they were still trying to hold on for dear life after they realized that they probably weren't going to score. And I hate it, right? Because I want to believe that Detroit's better than that and that Trevor James would try to go for a win, but he definitely went for the draw. He definitely was just trying to get a result, and it didn't work out against a vastly superior team. That said, where are the goals going to come from for Detroit? I don't know. But if you ask me the same thing with Miami, you look at the names on the paper and you say, well, obviously it's Kyle Murphy. Obviously it's Velo. Those are the guys that are going to score, but will they? Will they? I don't think so. I'm taking Detroit City. Lock it, babe.
Oh boy.
I'm ready for them to break my heart. Moving on once again, we are going to the rematch. Oh, the rematch. We are heading up to Lynn Family Stadium as Louisville City takes on San Antonio FC. I have a little gripe with this. I know it's the rematch, but I wish they would have put this in San Antonio. I feel like give the champs the rematch at home still, but maybe you say, well, if it was at Louisville, you have that storyline. It's still weird. Louisville is a team that doesn't look great. They look extremely beatable, which is not something that I think I've ever said about a Danny Cruz team before. But then you look at San Antonio and they don't look beatable, but they don't look like they're winning games as convincingly as they did before. So which team is going to come out on top? And if, further question, is either team going to look convincing in their result?
Yeah, this is a tough one, and Kaler, to at least provide a little frame of reference. Orange County had won Orange County had won the 2021, and then I think they had their rematch when they played last year. That game was in Tampa Bay, which Tampa Bay ended up getting revenge and got the victory in that one. But as you had mentioned, this is just a really different Louisville team that we've seen, and they've started the year with their 2 home games, and just scoring 1 goal at home is just looking back through their kind of span of like 3 game stretches at home. They don't typically go through this period of not scoring a bunch of goals at which should be their fortress. And going up against a San Antonio team who could very likely take advantage of any of these lapses and errors, I do think San Antonio come out of this match with a result. I think it'll be low scoring, but I do think they eventually get a win, and Louisville faces a very tough match against Charleston the following week.
Yeah, Louisville, when you look at the problems they've had, they've used more players this year than any other team in the league. They've had a different back line, 4 out of 5 games, different goalkeepers at times. Finally, this last weekend against Detroit, which is a caveat in and of itself, they had that Dia, Winder, Tosh, Perez backline that you would think of as the first choice. And they pretty much dominated Detroit for 90 minutes. I mean, they really deserve to probably win that game 3-0, if not more. I think that they're going to have a bit of momentum. Being at home is a big deal. San Antonio is very injured, and despite the fact that they've done well to patch over that, I think it's going to catch up with them at some point. So I think Louisville City is going to win this one. I think Wilson Harris is going to be the guy to do it at the end of the day, because it's a big deal to have him in there for Lancaster. So yeah, just believing in what Danny Cruz is selling here.
Ryan, I hate to do this. I'm going to ask you to change my pick. This match is between 2 teams that got to know each other pretty well at the end of the season last year, and San Antonio dominated. When you look at how much this team came back, Louisville City is going to want revenge in front of a home crowd that wants revenge. But I also see this, and I believe in sports, man. With everything that's going on in Louisville, there's going to be a different energy in the crowd. There's going to be a want to win for more than just your team, for more than your teammates, for more than your fans. There's going to be the name of the city. It's going to be a win for the city of Louisville, for Louisville City. There's going to be a different kind of motivation going on in this match, and I just believe in sports way too much. This one's going to be Louisville for me. And for the last match, funny enough, this is a Ford Madison versus Greenville Triumph. Ford Madison, who just lost in the U.S. Open Cup in extra time 2-3 to Chicago House. And this is a Greenville Triumph team who I put the question out there, and I've received a lot of flack for it, and I'm going to stand by what I said. This is a team that has only 1 win in the last 12 matches. That's something that you don't see with Greenville. And you can point at injuries, a young team, everything, so on and so forth. But Triumph are struggling right now. And this is still a Ford Madison team that I stand by has the best backline in all of League One. And against the Triumph team who have looked really, really shaky on the attack, what do we see here?
I mean, they're one of 3 teams, or these 2 teams are one of 3 in the league right now without a win. And like you had mentioned, Kale, or I think this Greenville Triumph team is the one in USL 1 and maybe in USL as a whole that desperately needs a win more than any other club right now. And I don't know. I think there's something more wrong with the Triumph this year that I just can't really select them to take a victory. And I really think Ford Madison, and whether that's motivated from the Open Cup defeat tonight or just trying to start the year off on a better foot, I mean, a victory here for them would take them to as high as 3rd, depending on other results. I think Ford Madison get a win at home.
Honestly, my gut is telling me that Greenville ought to win this one. I think they've got a lot at stake here, as has been mentioned. I ultimately leaned into a draw. Forward Madison didn't go with their best lineup tonight. I think they've pretty much saved about as best as they can the legs of Moro Sakero and Christian Cheney to really take it to Greenville in attack. And if you saw any of their game against Lexington last week, that pair was really fantastic, creating trouble. Greenville has just lost the magic a little bit. It's going a bit stale. I know a game against Tormenta last week is a really poor barometer because Tormenta is a rocket, but they just were making some really poor mistakes in terms of their defensive rotations. They didn't look as connected as you would expect from a John Harkes team. So I could see this one going either way, and I think that informed my draw pick.
You know, when I say when I put out there, we need to ask questions of Harkes, right? I realize kind of in context, you sit there and you see that question, you say, should he be fired? But I didn't really mean it like that. When I sent that tweet out, what I was really thinking here was, when do we need to sit there and stop saying, oh, I mean, look, it's Harkes, man. It's Harkes. You know, this is just his teams do this, his teams do that. Well, his teams haven't done it in 12 games. You just have to ask questions. The same thing we asked about Lowry. Where's the tactical adjustment going to come? And you can sit there and say roster issues, and those are real. But after 12 games, if you're this level of coach, you figure it out in some way. Or you go to your ownership and say, help me figure it out. Give me some money. I need a player. Help me figure it out. And this offseason, Ford Madison went out there and made signings to figure it out. They're a team that was very average to bad for all their years of existence. I mean, the more kits than wins was a joke that existed, and it rang true for a couple of years. I'm taking Ford Madison here. I believe in that attack. I believe in Cheney, and I really believe in that back line, who's going to be a problem moving forward for League One. I'm sorry, Gio. So,
and I think one of the interesting things with Harkes is that he's been at the team since 2019, and it almost becomes a question of how do you continually motivate players year after year with that same system and try to still keep everything fresh and keep everything kind of on the front foot, and kind of moving forward. That does it become a problem?
Getting a freeze from Ryan here. Yeah.
Rip. I thought that was my internet.
Yeah, that was mine. That was mine that had a hiccup. How far did I get into?
Something about motivating.
Yeah, just been there since 2018, having trouble motivating at this point.
Yeah, just a question of, are things kind of growing stale, and it's just kind of concern of how do we kind of refresh the team and like ensure that nothing kind of that it just doesn't grow stale. You see this, as you've mentioned, Kaylor, in the Premier League. You asked that question of Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp of, okay, you've been here for a while. How do we make things different this year?
Well, you know, we've been talking a lot about the Premier League. I actually don't watch the Premier League that much. I don't know why I keep referencing it. I just know it's what most people watch because it comes on cable. But someone like Pep Guardiola has been very blunt about it. Of sometimes he sells the player just to get rid of them, to make the locker room less stale. He said that blatantly of, Yeah, he was our best player. We liked him a lot. Everybody loved him in the locker room. He was actually one of the best parts of the locker room. Got rid of him because that's what good teams do. Sir Alex Ferguson did the same thing. Of good player, get him out. We don't need him. We can find another good player, and it keeps everybody on their toes. This Greenville team, though, this last year, they've sneakily had a lot of rotation, even though their first 3 years, 5 year or 4 years of existence, they kept pretty much the same starting 11 with a couple of cogs being replaced out of the machine. But this year, it's pretty much a brand new squad with a couple of returning guys. And maybe this is where we see the resurgence of a Hark squad of, hey, maybe they can get it on track. Maybe this is the new squad that needs to hear the message for the first time, and a couple of the leaders who can help relay it to, the younger guys in a different way. But right now it's just not working.
And to be fair, even though they didn't start last year with 3 consecutive defeats, they did start their last season with win before they got their first result against Chattanooga, and they still ended up in the postseason as the number 2 seed. So it's still very early in the season, but just for confidence sakes, they need to get a result.
For sure. Well, any other USL thoughts from any of you guys tonight?
All
All
good.
right. Ryan, final thoughts for the night?
Yeah, I saw the Super Mario Brothers movie last Friday, and I thought it was good for at least what I was expecting, kind of to go in there, and I really enjoyed it. So, yeah, I had a good time, and I look forward to the Nintendo Cinematic Movie universe expanding to a Super Smash Brothers movie within like a decade.
John?
Yeah, I usually try to think of something beforehand, and I'm just like mentally void right now. I saw Mario last week on opening day. Like, you would be surprised at how adult the crowd at that theater was in terms of just like no kids at all, which was somewhat funny. But had some family in town last week, which was fun for me. So I guess like go out there, enjoy your family, spend time with the people you really love. That's my advice for the week.
Wonderful. I love that. Yeah, so kind of what you're saying with I have not watched the Mario movie, but you're kind of mentioning that the lack of adults or the lack of kids there. A couple years ago, I distinctly remember going into the Penguins movie, like the Penguins of Madagascar movie, and there was not a single child there. And it was very bizarre because I was the only adult there, or the only like everybody else was just adults, and I think everybody else went there to scout it for their kids or like their nephews and nieces, but there was no kids. I hate that I liked that movie as much as I did.
Those are fun, man. I'm into that.
I've heard the D&D movie is pretty good too, actually.
Yeah, you're getting very good reviews.
Yeah.
I need to see that. There hasn't been like I was trying to think, like, there hasn't been like a good action fantasy adventure film since, I don't know, was it the Hobbit trilogy? If you can consider those as good
Arguably,
as,
right?
I mean, arguably. Yeah, I enjoyed it for the spectacle, but like diving down into it, I was like, yeah, I don't think this will sweep the Oscars like Return of the King did.
Yeah, probably not. Again, normally I have music stuff, but today I actually come in with a TV show for the first time. I watched season 3 of Emily in Paris.
Fun.
I hated it. I hated
Yeah,
it.
that's also fair.
The first 2 seasons I loved. I was all in on the first 2 seasons because okay, the side characters were what made it for me. And if you haven't watched it, no spoilers here. I'm not going to give you spoilers. But like I can't remember the black guy. I can't remember. It's not Alfie. It's the other one that works there. I'm blanking on his name now. Like he basically did nothing. And Luke, this old like white guy who his entire thing is basically making sex jokes, didn't really make an appearance until the 4th episode. And that's that's a big part of that season, 40% of the season. I hated it. I wanted to like it so badly, but just couldn't. Just couldn't get into it. Whatever. You win some, you lose some. The first 2 seasons, great. I enjoyed it. Granted, this is my hot take. That's kind of how I felt about Stranger Things. I hated this last season. It got away from that like sci-fi thriller and became like horror, and I hate horror. So I was all the way out.
I've not seen a single episode
Of any of it?
of Stranger
Same,
Things. No,
same.
I've never seen it.
Really?
I've never subscribed to Netflix, which is, I guess, my weird
Oh.
tick.
I've never had a Netflix account. I've just bum off other people.
Yeah, I
they
guess
have.
that's a good point. Yeah.
I don't know. I've had Netflix, and I was just like, I keep thinking, I was like, yeah, I just like never get around into like sitting down to watch it. My sister has watched it and she loves it. It's just, I was like, I'm like way too far behind to like really dive into it, and I just can't.
This is, I guess, if we're omitting stuff we haven't seen, I have not seen a single second of Ted Lasso. I just don't have Apple Plus, and I just
Yeah,
cannot.
No one, I don't understand how so many people have seen it when, if you ask 99% of people, they don't even know that Apple Plus is a thing.
I don't know. I know people are
It seems
going
like one of those
crazy.
shows you can like really clip and kind of get the gist of it. Like you just post a lot of the episode clips on YouTube, and it's like, oh yeah, I get where they're going.
Yeah,
That's fair.
I keep seeing the Believe sign, and it just reminds me of Notre Dame and whatever that like cardboard sign is. That's essentially a food please sign that they stuck up there and no one ever took down.
Play like a champion today.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, it's dumb. Also, Rudy was offside. Just need to throw that one out there too.
I mean, to be fair, it's at least a motivational sign. It's not the dumbest thing a college team has, or like as a good luck charm. I mean, Clemson has a rock they took from Death Valley into what is now known as the second most popular college stadium that has Death Valley as the name.
The video, this is just showing my niche of that I love baseball a lot. There was like this video of UCF's baseball team breaking into Clemson's Death Valley just to sprint down the hill after they swept Clemson's baseball team, which was awesome. But now they're under allegations because apparently they've been like cheating and modifying their bats this whole time. So everybody's just like, well, that was you broke into a stadium, trespassed, and you were cheating. Whatever. This is an awful podcast. Stop listening. Any final thoughts? Subscribe to Backhilled. Just want to throw that out.
Yeah, we just real quick plug. We got a survey of about 15 of the 24 coaches in the USL who had all sorts of quite bad takes about best player, best atmosphere. So that was surprising and fun to see.
Loudon, are we sure that Ryan, the biggest Loudon fan on the planet, did not receive the ballot and just started stuffing that? I mean, I'm excited for people to start watching Loudon games again because they get to hear Loudon Guy again. If you haven't watched a Loudon live stream, Loudon Guy is awesome.
Quite loud.
And United. Bless them. Oh, man. All right. Oh, do you have any FM experiments coming out anytime soon, Ryan?
Not one USL related, but one at least Tottenham related that was kind of a passion project of mine that should be out sometime before the end of the week.
Beautiful. Looking forward to it. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all for being here. And even though he is not here, he is here in spirit and through your speakers, wherever you're listening to this. Cue us, Alan.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. This and every episode is brought to you by the Beautiful Game Network. Find podcasts and other written work at bgn.fm. Once again, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you guys again next week.